Recent studies have shown that people with Down syndrome are highly vulnerable to developing Alzheimer's disease, the most common cause of dementia. Today we are at the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior, where we will learn how research is helping to identify the disease early and intervene to help slow its progression. We will also look at the challenges older adults face when they are caregivers of a child with dementia, when they may soon need caregivers themselves. And later in the program, we will visit with an organization that provides assessments to identify needs, benefits, and gaps in service for caregiver and care recipient. Please stay tuned for Aging Well in LA. Hi, I'm Paul Peterson. Welcome to Aging Well in LA. Let's start today's program with a visit to Caregiver Corner, where Susie Rodriguez Shapiro talks about memory loss in older adults.
Have you ever wondered what's the difference between normal versus abnormal memory loss as we age? Have you ever wondered what you can do to try and maintain or improve your memory? Well, as we age, we should know that severe memory loss, like Alzheimer's, is not normal. Some of the more normal parts of aging would mean a slower thinking process. It takes us a little longer to recall things. Sometimes we need memory cues, like, that woman at church, the one that has a lovely singing voice and has the great grandkid. Yeah, Carol, that's who I'm talking about. That's what we're talking about. So now let's talk about the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. Dementia describes symptoms that have severe impact on how someone remembers things, behaves. However, Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia. According to the Alzheimer's Association, about 60 to 80% of dementia cases are Alzheimer's. So let's talk about what is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's affects the brain and affects memory, thinking, and behavior. It gets worse with time, and so far there is no cure.
Susie will be back later in the program to share some tips to maintain and improve your memory. Right now, we are in the office of Jean Develay, Director of the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Resource Center. Dr. Develay, can you tell us what the focus of your department is?
We do work both on animal models of diseases because that allows us to understand what goes wrong into an animal, and we can identify molecules which can serve as the basis for eventually to help children with developmental disability. We are focused on early intervention because in developmental diseases, the brain develops not only abnormally, but then there is degeneration that takes place. So if we can intervene early on, we can prevent degeneration, and therefore we can delay the onset of, for instance, dementia in Down syndrome. That will be our aim.
Dr. Develay, in a moment we will be visiting with your colleague, Dr. Linda Nelson, who will talk about the relationship between children with Down syndrome and the onset of dementia later on in their lives. Now, how does that fit into your research here?
Well, this fits extremely well because she has been able to do longitudinal studies of Down syndrome and to use non-invasive techniques to see how the brain may be accumulating well-known substances such as amyloid can cause, for instance, Alzheimer's disease. And we have studied those samples for a number of different parameters that we know are very important during normal development. And we can see that in Down syndrome, they are defective. And so perhaps by by being able to develop a treatment, we could restore maybe functions into the brain.
Thank you, Dr. Develay. Now, as I said, we will be talking to Dr. Nelson about her research next. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You are very welcome.
As promised, we are now in the office of UCLA Professor and researcher Dr. Linda Nelson, who is the principal investigator of studies concerning diagnosis and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Nelson, can you describe what happens with the onset of Alzheimer's disease?
When Alzheimer's attacks, it attacks the brain physically. It changes the brain, it kills brain cells, it kills brain tissue, it affects the neurons, but it also affects the way a person thinks, feels, and responds emotionally. And that would be the dementia part. So dementia, in a sense, or neurocognitive disorder, is a symptom of Alzheimer's. It's called a cognitive symptom or an emotional symptom.
Dr. Nelson, can you tell us about the relationship between children with Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease?
Children with Down syndrome tend to be at very high risk for Alzheimer's disease. They're at high risk because of their genetic predisposition for it. And what that means is that they have an extra copy of chromosome 21, and by virtue of having that, it puts them at risk for developing what's called amyloid precursor protein. And this protein is putting them at even greater risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. And so consequently what happens is they get Alzheimer's disease at a very early age, sometimes as young as 12 years old. And it progresses at a much more rapid rate.
Your research is focused on detection of Alzheimer's and how we can help these children with Down syndrome as they age. What has your research shown?
We feel that people with Down syndrome can tell us a great deal about Alzheimer's disease. And what happens is that when we do the research studies that we're doing here, we do them through PET imaging. And what PET imaging does is it identifies the signs of Alzheimer's disease in their brains in terms of where the signs are located, what part of their brain, and also what level of plaques and tangles, which are the signs of Alzheimer's, are there. And so by looking and examining the brain in those terms, I work with scientists in nuclear medicine who are able to identify when Alzheimer's attacks the brain, at what age, and also what areas of the brain it may be attacking first.
Dr. Nelson, one of the issues that you are dealing with is the impact that Alzheimer's has on the families of children with Down syndrome. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Doctor, how do you let the family of a child with Down syndrome know that their child is at additional risk for Alzheimer's?
You do it in a way very delicately, but very informatively. You educate them about their child and that they may be subject to having Alzheimer's at an early age. You explain to them about some of the earliest signs and what to look for. You talk to them about what kinds of resources are available should they start to see some of these signs and how to follow through. And for example, as a clinician, I work with them and I do evaluations and I do screens and I help them through screening methods, test methods, identify some of the earliest signs and symptoms. And if it looks like they might be showing early signs or symptoms of Alzheimer's, then I talk to them, I educate them, I work with them, and I tell them about how these symptoms will probably progress in the disease.
It must be physically difficult sometimes for parents who are already seniors to provide the same amount of care to their adult child that they could when they themselves were younger.
Many families are in denial. They can't believe that their son or daughter is actually getting Alzheimer's at a point when they're in their 60s or 70s and their son or daughter's in their 30s or 40s. So it's very startling to them to find that out. Many accept it when they see the changes occurring. Some of the earliest changes are emotional. They're not memory loss in people with Down syndrome. And people with intellectual disabilities can always tell us what's wrong. So they might begin to do very odd or unusual behaviors. For example, one family member told me that her daughter started putting her tennis shoes in the microwave. Another family member told me that her daughter started dressing in a wedding gown, thinking that she was getting married that day and that it was her wedding day. And so she dressed completely in white, expecting to be married. And it was this sudden turn of behaviors relatively within a short period of time that occurs and leads people to think that there might be something wrong. Families like that need education, and as a clinician and as a researcher, we really try to educate them about what's out there in terms of resources to help them. It's very hard on families, especially elderly parents who are raising adult people with intellectual disabilities. And so what we try to do is let them know what's out there. There's many, many resources in Southern California, in Northern California. For example, there's a group called DS for Down syndrome, AD for Alzheimer's disease, Connect. And that's an organization of folks who are dedicated to helping families, helping caregivers know what's available to them to help, what to expect as a disease progresses, and how it affects individuals with intellectual disabilities.
If a member of a family with a child with Down syndrome calls Alzheimer's Down Syndrome Connect for guidance, what might they be told?
They would tell the person that there are family support groups, that there are associations dedicated to family members and caregivers who can offer assistance. So it's not just knowledge, it's also emotional assistance. The strength to be able to withstand what they know they have to expect with Alzheimer's disease. Many people know how devastating the disease can be, and they expect that to happen. They can see it playing out. And in order to cope with it more effectively, it's necessary to reach out to some of the family groups and the caregiver support groups.
Dr. Nelson, thank you so much for sharing your research on the connection between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's, and more importantly, for your work with the families of those afflicted with the disease.
Thank you.
Of course, there is a great impact on the families of those who have had Down syndrome and are now suffering with Alzheimer's. With me now are Kathy and Tracy. That's the mother and sister of Mary. Kathy, tell us about Mary.
Well, Mary has Down syndrome. She's 49 years old, and now she has Alzheimer's. We could have never anticipated that in a million years, that would happen to her. And so we're actually at the last stages of her life.
What were the warning signs that Mary had the onset of Alzheimer's?
The beginning signs of Alzheimer's for Mary were very, very subtle, as they are with all people with Down syndrome, because you don't know if the behavior changes are due to the Down syndrome, and of course we had no clue that Alzheimer's was even in the picture.
What changes did you notice in Mary's personality?
Well, behavior changes. Now, Mary was a very outgoing woman. She played the drums, she's a great weaver, and in her work environment, but very gradually, she would withdraw from the group. At lunchtime, she's sitting by herself. You know, that was not, but you know, we didn't pick up on that because we weren't aware that Alzheimer's was even in the picture at that time.
And when you visit her now, what is her condition?
Right now, Mary is in the last stages of Alzheimer's, and that means that she doesn't speak anymore. She really doesn't know who we are. She doesn't walk. She's confined to a wheelchair or to her bed. She needs to be fed. She's actually totally helpless at this point. She's developed a mannerism of crying that one would think it would relate to pain, but it seems to be a reversal back to a more infantile stage of her life. but more like a young baby, not a newly born baby, but maybe 4 or 5 months old, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon where they're overstimulated and they just cry. And that's what Mary is doing now, only the difficulty is she's not a baby and I can't pick her up and walk around with her and rock her.
Tracy, you are Mary's older sister and have had a long emotional relationship with her. What changes have you seen in her since she became not only a sufferer of Down syndrome, but also Alzheimer's?
Mary always was the life of the party, Paul. I mean, when I look at her now, she's so like catatonic, but I keep thinking of her when she was so funny and sarcastic, and she would always, just hit your shoulder, oh, come on, and she'd do her fun interaction with people, and everybody loved her. So when I see her now being so, I mean, it's like she's lost. She has there's no animation anymore, but I keep seeing that Mary that I knew so long ago and that I connected with. But somehow on a level, I still kind of know that she senses the connection, even though she's not showing it. I mean, maybe it's something that I just really want.
What sources of assistance can you recommend to those in your situation?
I urge everyone to reach out, and there are programs and help within the community. Sometimes you have to do a little research in order to find these programs, but as caregivers, and incidentally now we have the aging parents who have become the caregivers of a son or daughter with Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. So it's a reverse situation there. And as I learned with being a caregiver for my husband, it is extremely important for caregivers to get all the help that they can, because caregivers burn out very quickly.
Well, that's for sure. Kathy, in your situation, as far as caregiving is concerned, roles are reversed. Instead of having a younger caregiver, as is the general rule with seniors, Mary's caregiver is older than she is, and you're her mother.
Isn't that ironic? Because I'm the aging parent with a daughter with Alzheimer's.
Kathy, caring for Mary is not your first experience in caregiving for Alzheimer's patients. I understand that you are sharing your experiences by writing of them.
I wrote a book about my experience with my husband called Widow with a Husband, an Alzheimer's Experience. And so the thought came to me, Mary has a story to tell, and she can't tell it. And so I'm writing a book, I'm in the process of it now, and the title of it is Through the Eyes of My Mother, Mary's Story. And she has a great story to tell, and I can write it through my experience and through Tracy's experience. Tracy will certainly be part of it. So it's very interesting. Just because someone has Down syndrome doesn't mean that they're just stuck in a non-creative world.
Kathy and Tracy, thank you so much for being here and sharing your journey with us.
Very nice to meet you and to be here.
The nonprofit organization Tzedek provides free expert legal advice to low-income residents of Los Angeles City and County. With us today are Yolanda Erickson and Michelle Wolf, both of whom work on the Transitions program, which assists older caregivers of aging intellectually and developmentally disabled adults. Yolanda, tell us about the program and why it came into existence.
We created this program called Transitions to address the issues of aging of the intellectually disabled population. This is a population that's really a new group of people with intellectual disabilities, never lived long, healthy lives before. And thanks to deinstitutionalization and access to health care, they're living longer, healthier lives, and they are encountering the same sorts of issues that every other senior aging finds in life, but there really aren't tools or programs in place to deal with that. What we find is that people have not made any plans for aging for their loved ones who have intellectual disabilities. So they generally haven't made wills or trusts or even thought about where will this person live once I'm gone, who will make decisions about this person's health care, who will make decisions about this person's assets, and how his or her life will proceed just the way it is, helping to have them maintain the maximum amount of independence that's possible. But there is that need to make plans.
Michelle, you are the Transition Coalition Coordinator. Besides Tzedek, who are the other organizations involved with you?
We have 32 coalition members who've been meeting regularly for the past year and a half. And we have partners, a very diverse group of providers, such as Tierra del Sol, which is the largest provider of employment and day programs in Southern California to over 600 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have groups like the Help Group, which provides educational opportunities, post-secondary assistance for the same population. There's longtime providers such as Goodwill, Easter Seals, and United Cerebral Palsy, Autism Society of Los Angeles. And we also have some of our Jewish community partners like Jewish Family Service, Jewish Vocational Service, EDA Israel. And it's really been wonderful to bring this group together, joined by some government officials, such as from your own Department of Aging in the city and in the county. The County Department of Mental Health has been a very active participant because so many of our adults have both developmental disabilities and a mental illness. In LA County, there's 7 regional centers, and they're paid largely through the state and taxpayer funded. And they provide from birth to death case management, referrals, and assistance. And they're just adjusting to the fact that they have so many older consumers themselves. They've been really focused on early start, young children, school-age children, and even transitioning over to college-age children. But no one's ever had this level of older adults with developmental disabilities before, so we're all in the same boat.
There must be quite a few gaps in opportunities available to this part of our population. Can you tell us about some of those gaps?
Some of the gaps are inadequate housing for all the adults who need to move out of their parents' homes, since 75 to 80% of them are still living at home with their aging parent. We need a lot more job opportunities outside of sheltered workshops, real work, competitive employment with job coaching, and we need a lot of social and recreational opportunities. This is a group of people that want to be an active part of the community.
One of the other gaps that we've identified is that once you turn 18 in California, you're considered an adult in the eyes of the law. And you alone have the right to make decisions about your health care and your finances. And unless there is somebody identified as an agent, either through the form of a power of attorney for health care or finances, or if somebody does not have capacity to make decisions, then we can help them obtain a conservatorship so somebody has the authority. Because what we don't want to see is your example of somebody that is an aging, developmentally disabled adult, let's say someone with Down syndrome, that that may have been fairly independent and had some had the ability to make decisions for themselves, and now is looking at Alzheimer's or dementia, and we realize their cognitive ability is going to decline rapidly. So we really need to have something in place to where if they have the ability to name an agent, and if they don't have an ability to name an agent, we can start the conservatorship process so someone has the legal authority to get health care for them, to get housing, to make the decisions that are so critical to enable them to live their best lives.
All of those services you mentioned earlier that you provide must be very expensive for the families.
Most of these families do not have the means to pay private attorneys to create a long-term care plan for them. So it's a wonderful service that we offer completely free of charge. And our hope is not only to give these families authority to make decisions, but to give them the attendant peace of mind that comes with that, that they've done some planning, that they know that if something happens to them tomorrow, that there are some plans in place.
Yolanda, who may benefit from this program?
We're looking for anybody that has a developmental disability that is aging, any of their family members or loved ones or siblings their parents, their neighbors. Anyone can contact us for information, but we're also really concerned at reaching people who have not been diagnosed with an intellectual disability. We know they're out there and they are not receiving services, they're not part of the system, and we would hope to reach them as they age and get them involved and to make them aware of what services are available in the city to help them.
Thank you, Yolanda and Michelle, for joining us today. And now, here is Janet Morris, Director of the Family Care Project at Tzedek, to describe some more of their services.
We help not only with public benefits, including Medicare, Medi-Cal, and in-home supportive services, we also help people plan for the future, using powers of attorney, advance directives, and wills. In addition to that, our Caregiver Project helps people who are in long-term care situations, as well as people who are caring for loved ones at home. We have many publications which you can access through our Tzedek website, including our Transitions brochure, the Caregiver Companion, the Nursing Home Companion, and Caring for a Relative's Child, to help obtain guardianships over a minor child for a relative. Thank you very much for joining us today.
And now let's call on Susie Rodriguez-Shapiro, today's Caregiver Corner contributor, to give us some tips to maintain and improve your memory.
So let's talk about some tips to maintain and improve your memory. We recommend that you exercise your mind. By that we say stay informed, read your newspapers, magazines, go to a class at one of the senior centers in your neighborhood and learn something new that triggers your mind to think. Do puzzles, whether they're crossword puzzles, Sudoku, or the old-fashioned tabletop puzzles. Socialize with others. That's another beauty of the senior centers in your community. Exercising the body is very important. The healthier your body, the healthier your brain. It also decreases your stress and helps motivate you to stay engaged. Also, watch what you eat and drink. Remember that low-fat diets are better for you. Fruits and vegetables should be a bigger part of your daily consumption. And watch the alcohol consumption. As we get older, we metabolize alcohol a little differently. So we think that it's important that you create a system. This will be very helpful for you in remembering that you keep your keys in a certain place, your eyeglasses, your wallet, have a place for them. Remember to put things in that place so that when you're looking for them, there you go. Use a daily to-do list. Write things down in your calendar. Use sticky notes to remind yourself of what needs to be done. And partner with your doctor. Discuss changes that you see and how long you've seen them or when you noticed them so that you can keep track. Maybe it's a medication interaction or something else that has triggered it. But keep open communication with your doctor. Keeping a health journal can be very helpful too. Reminding somebody of when the vaccinations have been done, when new medications were introduced, or other things that may affect the quality of your health. Basically, remind you to maintain a positive attitude. Optimists tend to live longer. So until next time on Caregiver Corner, take care of yourself.
Thanks, Susie. That's great advice. Well, that's it for today's Aging Well in LA. I'm Paul Peterson. We'll see you next time.